Olivia Grant was a woman who seemed to have it all. At 34, she had a promising career, a close-knit circle of friends, and a zest for life that made her the center of every gathering. But beneath the laughter and the infectious energy lay a darker reality, a truth she had yet to uncover. A truth that would cost her everything. For months, Olivia had been trying to rebuild after a painful relationship. She had moved to Brooklyn to leave her past behind and start anew, finding solace in her work and friendships. Yet, even in her newfound freedom, there was one area she couldn't quite control, her love life. Enter Daniel Lawson, charismatic, charming, and everything Olivia had hoped for in a partner. Their connection felt effortless, and for a while, Olivia thought she had found the perfect match. But as the months passed, cracks began to show in their seemingly perfect relationship. Daniel's behavior became erratic, his stories didn't line up, and his mysterious absences grew more frequent. Olivia brushed it off, trusting that work commitments were the reason for his secrecy. But everything changed the night she walked in on him with another woman. This wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was a revelation. The man she had trusted, the man she had shared her hopes and dreams with, had been hiding something much darker than infidelity. It wasn't just about betrayal, it was about something far more dangerous. And Olivia, unwilling to let it slide, made a choice that would alter the course of her life forever. Thank you my viewers and my subscribers. If you are new here, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our new videos. Olivia Grant was born and raised in the small town of New Haven, Connecticut. As a child, she was always described as the curious one, the girl who asked endless questions and refused to accept anything at face value. Growing up in a close-knit family, Olivia's parents instilled in her a strong work ethic and a sense of independence. Her father, a local contractor, was a figure of stability, and her mother, a high school teacher, was both nurturing and intellectually stimulating. The home they provided was one of love, though tinged with their own battles. Olivia's mother, in particular, struggled with anxiety, which made Olivia keenly aware of the fragility of mental health. As a teenager, Olivia was known for her infectious laughter and adventurous spirit. She was always the first to organize a weekend outing or host a gathering at her house. Her friends often marveled at her ability to be the life of any party, even though Olivia was deeply sensitive about her vulnerabilities. These social gatherings served as a way to mask her internal struggles, especially after her parents' divorce when she was 16. The split had shaken Olivia, leaving her with a sense of uncertainty about love and commitment. When Olivia left home for college at the University of Connecticut, she had already decided that she would forge her own path, away from the shadow of her family's issues. She pursued a degree in marketing, a field that allowed her to combine her creativity with her pragmatic approach to life. Olivia's early years in the professional world were marked by a series of small victories. Landing a coveted position at a marketing firm in New York City after graduation was her proudest achievement. But while her career soared, her personal life became increasingly complicated. Her relationship with Daniel Lawson, the man who would eventually play a pivotal role in her story, began innocently enough. Olivia met Daniel through mutual friends at a networking event. He was charming and well-spoken, with a polished appearance that made him stand out in any room. They hit it off immediately, and soon they were inseparable. Daniel's success in the finance world intrigued Olivia, and his seemingly grounded personality made him an easy choice for a partner. He had a way of making her feel safe, and for a while, Olivia allowed herself to believe that she had found someone trustworthy. However, as the relationship deepened, Olivia began to notice subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. Daniel, while affectionate, was often distant, retreating into long silences or disappearing for days on end. Olivia, ever the optimist, brushed off these moments, telling herself that his demanding job in finance was the reason for his absences. But as time went on, cracks began to form, and Olivia's once unshakable trust in him began to erode. Her ability to cope with uncertainty was tested again when she realized that Daniel was hiding more than just emotional distance. After confronting him, she learned the truth. Daniel was involved in illegal activities, running a financial scheme that spanned much farther than she could have ever imagined. His revelation didn't just shatter her world, it made her question everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and betrayal. Daniel Lawson's background was one of privilege, shrouded in mystery. Born into a wealthy family in New York, Daniel had always enjoyed the luxuries that came with his status. His father was a prominent banker, and his mother a successful entrepreneur, but despite their achievements, Daniel often felt invisible, overshadowed by their expectations. He quickly learned how to play the part of the perfect son, excelling academically and socially. Yet, beneath the surface, Daniel wrestled with a profound sense of inadequacy. While Olivia thought she had met a man with his life together, the truth was far more complicated. Daniel's career in finance was a mere facade, a well-constructed persona designed to mask the darker side of his existence. His involvement in illicit money laundering had started years earlier, during a brief but impactful internship at a shady investment firm. What began as a small, seemingly harmless side hustle grew into a web of criminal activity that Daniel became increasingly entangled in. Daniel's charm was his most dangerous trait. He had a magnetic personality that drew people in, making them feel seen and understood. But this charm was a tool, a weapon he used to manipulate and control. His relationships, including the one with Olivia, were built on half-truths and distractions. For Daniel, being vulnerable was a risk he couldn't afford. The more he revealed about his true self, the more he risked losing his carefully constructed image. When Olivia discovered his betrayal, Daniel's world began to unravel. But his reaction was not one of remorse. He saw her as a threat to the life he had worked so hard to maintain. His fear of exposure, combined with the increasing pressure from his criminal associates, pushed him to take drastic measures to silence her. Olivia's decision to go public with the truth became a ticking time bomb for Daniel, one he believed would destroy everything he had built. And so, in a moment of desperation, he made a choice that would ultimately seal both their fates. Liam Davis, Daniel's old friend, played a crucial role in the unraveling of the mystery. Though initially distant from Olivia, Liam's relationship with Daniel had been strained for years due to Daniel's increasingly erratic behavior. When Olivia reached out to him for help, Liam's reluctance to reveal what he knew about Daniel's past became a pivotal moment in the story. His vague warnings about Daniel's dark past planted the seeds of suspicion in Olivia's mind, eventually pushing her to confront Daniel and ultimately expose him. Another key figure was Rachel Green, Olivia's best friend and confidant. Rachel had been with Olivia through thick and thin, always ready to offer support or a shoulder to cry on. When Olivia's world began to crumble, Rachel was the one person who stood by her without hesitation. Rachel's role in the story is one of emotional support and grounding, providing Olivia with a sense of normalcy during an increasingly chaotic time. Brooklyn, New York. The heartbeat of the city that never sleeps, and for Olivia Grant, it was supposed to be her fresh start. She had moved here 5 years ago, escaping the remnants of a broken relationship and hoping to rebuild her life. The bustling streets, the cafes filled with writers and artists, and the endless opportunities in her career were the perfect backdrop for a woman looking to reclaim her independence. Yet, for all the vibrancy that surrounded her, Olivia couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was out of place, as if the city itself held secrets she wasn't yet meant to uncover. Olivia's apartment was in a charming, red brick building on a quiet street, a short walk from the East River. From her window, she could see the Brooklyn Bridge stretching across the water, lit up against the backdrop of the city's skyline. It was a sight that had brought her peace in the beginning. The apartment itself was cozy, decorated with warm tones and plants she tended to with care, an oasis amidst the frenetic energy of the city. But in recent months, the space had begun to feel smaller. The warmth she once felt in it had given way to a creeping unease, an unfamiliar weight in the air. It was the little things at first, the way Daniel would send texts at odd hours, his responses often delayed or curt. When they were together, his presence felt distant, as if his mind was constantly elsewhere. And then, there was the subtle change in his tone when she asked about his family or his past. His vague responses and avoidance only deepened her growing suspicion, but she dismissed it. After all, his job was demanding, and he was constantly on the go. The day Olivia decided to visit his apartment unannounced felt different, almost inevitable. She had spent the morning at work, but something gnawed at her all day, a restless energy that kept her from focusing. She told herself it was just another one of her occasional overthinking episodes, the same ones she'd had before when she first started dating Daniel. But this time, the nagging feeling wasn't something she could push aside. She needed to know the truth. When she arrived at Daniel's apartment that evening, the usual sense of anticipation she'd felt at the start of their relationship was replaced with an unfamiliar tension. As she approached the building, a sense of dread hung in the air, unsettling, like an invisible storm cloud gathering on the horizon. The sound of her footsteps echoed on the cold concrete, too loud in the quiet street, and as she climbed the stairs to his door, she felt as though she were walking towards something she couldn't undo. It wasn't until she saw them, Daniel, with another woman, standing in his living room, that everything she thought she knew about their relationship shattered. The sight was a jolt to her senses. It was as though the apartment itself held its breath, the walls closing in on her as the reality of her discovery sank in. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she felt dizzy, as if the room had tilted sideways. But it wasn't just the sight of Daniel with another woman that rattled her, it was the closeness between them, the familiarity that screamed a truth Olivia was too afraid to face. She backed away quietly, her mind spinning with questions she wasn't ready to answer. Later, in the silence of her apartment, the weight of that moment pressed on her. Her fingers hovered over the phone as she contemplated what to do next. The city outside her window buzzed with life, but inside, all Olivia could feel was the cold dread that had taken root deep in her chest. Something was terribly wrong, and the life she had worked so hard to build was about to crumble. Olivia's world shifted when she shared her decision with Daniel. The morning after her fateful discovery, she couldn't sleep, her mind racing with the fragments of information she had pieced together over the past few weeks. She had thought that confronting him would bring closure, that the truth would bring some clarity, but instead, it only led to a deeper abyss. When she arrived at the cafe to meet him, the tension in the air was thick. She had arrived early, sitting in a corner booth with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to steady the anxiety rising in her chest. Olivia's heart thudded against her ribcage as she waited. She knew this conversation could change everything, maybe it would give her the closure she needed, or maybe it would destroy whatever fragile connection they had left. Daniel walked in a few minutes late, as usual, his face a mask of indifference, but Olivia saw the subtle tightness in his jaw, the flicker of guilt in his eyes when their gazes met. He was always so controlled, so perfectly composed, but today, he was different. His usual self-assuredness had cracked, and Olivia could feel the shift. "Olivia," he greeted her, his voice softer than she remembered. It was almost apologetic. She barely nodded in response, her voice steady but sharp. "I know about the other woman. I've seen the receipts, the messages, everything." Daniel's face paled, his lips pressing together in a thin line as he sat down opposite her. He leaned back in the booth, rubbing his hand over his face, trying to gather his thoughts. For a moment, there was a silence between them that felt like a heavy weight in the room. Olivia was waiting for the truth, for him to come clean. But instead, he looked at her, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else, something deeper. "I didn't want you to find out this way," Daniel said, his voice shaky. "There's more. A lot more, Olivia." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken tension. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as her mind raced. She wasn't prepared for this. She had thought she would get answers, maybe some closure, but what he was about to say seemed to change the stakes entirely. "I've been involved in something illegal," he confessed, the words spilling out like a slow, reluctant surrender. "I've been laundering money through my position at the bank. I never meant for you to get involved, but it's too late now. They'll come for me, and they'll come for anyone I care about." For a moment, Olivia felt like the ground beneath her had disappeared. The cafe, the bustling city outside, the faces of passers-by, all of it seemed distant, muted. The world had tilted on its axis, and Olivia couldn't find her footing. She had suspected that something wasn't right, but she never imagined that Daniel, was capable of something like this. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't even know if she wanted to know, but she needed answers, needed to make sense of what she was hearing. Daniel's eyes flickered nervously. "I don't know their names. They're powerful people, Olivia. I've been trying to keep it all hidden, but now they know I'm slipping. They're going to make sure I don't talk, make sure I don't get away with this." Olivia stared at him, unable to comprehend what he was saying. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. The idea that Daniel, the man she had trusted, the man who had promised her a future, was now tangled up in criminal activity was too much to bear. She had to do something. She couldn't let him drag her into this mess. "Do you understand?" Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. "I never wanted you to get hurt, Olivia. I thought I could protect you, but now, it's all falling apart. I didn't want this. But now it's too late. You have to leave me before they come for you too." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, the urgency in his voice only deepening the terror that gripped her. She had been so naive, so blinded by her love for him that she hadn't seen the warning signs. Now it was too late. She had exposed his secrets, and in doing so, she had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. She had to do it. She had to expose him before it was too late. She couldn't let him get away with this, couldn't let him hurt anyone else the way he had hurt her. She typed furiously, detailing the financial crimes Daniel had confessed to, the woman he had been seeing, and the fear that had gripped her since his revelation. She included a tip to the authorities, hoping someone would take it seriously before it was too late. At 10 a.m. that morning, the post went live on Facebook. By noon, the messages began pouring in, from friends, from family, from acquaintances who had no idea what had been happening behind the scenes. They were worried, concerned, confused. But there was one message that stood out above the rest. It was from Daniel. "You have no idea what you've done," he wrote, his words dripping with fury. "You've made a huge mistake, Olivia. You'll regret this." The chilling text sent a wave of fear through Olivia's body, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. Not now. That evening, as Olivia sat in a restaurant with a friend, trying to distract herself from the storm brewing in her mind, she received a text message from Daniel. It was short, almost casual, but it sent a chill down her spine. "You think you're safe? You have no idea what's coming." She didn't respond. She couldn't. She felt the weight of the danger closing in around her, but she refused to let it break her. She couldn't take back what she had done, but she also knew that she was no longer in control of the narrative. As the night wore on, Olivia's anxiety grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. When the time came to leave, she hurried through the restaurant's front door, her heart thumping in her chest. She walked quickly to her car, the parking lot eerily quiet. Before she could even reach the door, a shadow emerged from the darkness. A sharp blow to the back of her head sent her crashing to the ground. Her vision blurred, and she felt something cold and metallic pressing against her skin, but before she could scream, the darkness took over. The next morning, Olivia's body was found in that same parking lot, a stark contrast to the vibrant, ambitious woman she had once been. The world she had fought so hard to build had been shattered in an instant, and the only thing left in its wake was the mystery of who had taken her life, and why. The hours following Olivia's murder were a blur of chaos. The police arrived at the scene, their blue lights flashing in the darkness of the parking lot. The city, still asleep at that hour, offered no answers, only a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded. Olivia's body was found just steps from her car, a single message left behind in her phone's inbox that haunted anyone who saw it: "You think you're safe? You have no idea what's coming." Detectives arrived quickly, their investigation starting immediately. Officer Sarah Reynolds, a seasoned detective with over 10 years of experience, was assigned to the case. She looked over the scene methodically, noting every detail, the absence of a struggle, the lack of any fingerprints, the strange cleanliness of the surroundings. Everything appeared calculated, precise. Nothing was left to chance. This wasn't a random act of violence. Whoever was responsible had planned it meticulously. At first, the investigation seemed like a simple case of a robbery gone wrong. Olivia's purse was still on her, but the only thing missing was her phone. It was a small detail, but it raised the first red flag. A killer doesn't typically care about leaving behind items of value. The phone, however, was a vital clue. Whoever had taken it was either hiding something or wanted to make sure that Olivia's final message never reached the authorities. The detectives quickly turned their attention to Olivia's social media accounts. It didn't take long for them to find her post from the morning before her murder, the one in which she had exposed Daniel's criminal activities. The post had gone viral, receiving thousands of shares and comments within hours. People were outraged, shocked by the revelations, and the authorities were inundated with tips. But Olivia's post, so carefully crafted in the early hours of the morning, was now gone. A deep sense of unease settled over Officer Reynolds when she realized that Olivia's Facebook account had been deleted, not just the post, but the entire profile. There was no trace of it left. Whoever had been involved in this knew how to cover their tracks. As the investigation unfolded, Olivia's friends and family struggled to cope with the loss. Rachel Green, Olivia's best friend, took it the hardest. She had been with Olivia the night before the murder, at dinner, talking about her Facebook post. The last words Olivia had spoken to her were about her relief at finally exposing the truth. Rachel, overwhelmed by grief and fear, began her own search, unwilling to let go of the belief that the authorities might miss something crucial. She went through Olivia's apartment, her work, and every digital footprint Olivia had left behind. It wasn't long before Rachel found a series of cryptic messages from Daniel that had been sent after Olivia's post. They were angry, threatening, filled with warnings that Olivia had made a mistake. But there was something else in the messages, a name. A reference to someone called Nick. Rachel, with a mix of desperation and determination, dug deeper. She found an old contact in Olivia's phone, a number listed only as Nick, with no last name. The only detail she could find was an address, a rundown building near the docks. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. Rachel's search was fraught with the emotional toll of Olivia's death. She had known her friend for years, had shared countless memories, and now she was left with a gaping hole. The constant flashbacks to their time together, laughing over coffee, arguing over trivial things, made Rachel question whether she had missed any signs that could have saved Olivia. The guilt consumed her. Each piece of the puzzle that didn't fit, each lead that went nowhere, weighed heavily on her. The police, too, were struggling with the mounting pressure. Officer Reynolds could feel the weight of the case pushing down on her. Olivia's murder had become a public spectacle, with media outlets picking up on the story. Every day brought new theories and accusations, but none of them pointed to anything concrete. She spent hours reviewing the security footage from the parking lot, looking for any trace of the person who had attacked Olivia. There was nothing. The cameras had caught nothing but a vague shadow, a fleeting figure in a hoodie, their face obscured. But Reynolds wasn't ready to give up. The more she thought about the case, the more she felt there was something off. This wasn't a random act. Someone wanted Olivia dead, and that someone had made sure to cover their tracks. Days passed, and with each day, the investigation seemed to run into a dead end. False leads began to surface. One tip claimed to have seen a man matching Daniel's description in the area the night of Olivia's murder, but the person who gave the tip later admitted to having mistaken the man for someone else. Another lead pointed to Olivia's former co-worker, a man who had been fired months earlier, but he had an airtight alibi and no motive. Each lead felt like a ghost, something that seemed promising at first but quickly dissolved into nothing. Then, there was the discovery of Olivia's phone, found in a dumpster near a subway station 2 days after her death. It was smashed beyond recognition, but forensic analysis revealed something chilling. The phone had been wiped clean, but not entirely. A data recovery team was able to retrieve the final deleted message, the one Olivia had sent to Daniel, where she warned him that she was going to the police. Daniel's name appeared over and over again in the investigation. Officers began to zero in on him, piecing together the fragments of his involvement in the criminal network Olivia had exposed. But there was one issue: Daniel was nowhere to be found. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Daniel had gone underground. His apartment was abandoned, his work colleagues reported him missing, and his bank accounts showed no recent activity. It was as if he had vanished without a trace. It wasn't just the police who were looking for him now. Word had spread within the criminal world, and the same people Daniel had been working with were now hunting him as well. The search for Daniel became the primary focus of the investigation. Officer Reynolds knew that if they could track him down, they would find the answers they were looking for. But with every passing day, the hope of finding him dimmed. The criminal network, the people Daniel had betrayed, were closing in on him, and the closer they got to finding him, the more dangerous things would become. For Rachel, the constant uncertainty was almost unbearable. She would sit in Olivia's empty apartment, replaying the last days of her life in her mind, wondering if there had been something she could have done differently. But the guilt she felt was only matched by her need for answers. Who had done this to Olivia? And why? The search continued, but as days turned into weeks, the chances of finding Daniel or the person who had taken Olivia's life grew slimmer. The investigation, once filled with hope and certainty, was now clouded with doubt. As the case went cold, Olivia's murder became another unsolved tragedy, a case without closure. But Rachel wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. It had been nearly a month since Olivia's murder, and the investigation had hit a wall. The search for Daniel continued to yield nothing, and the authorities were left with little more than theories and false leads. Rachel, exhausted from the emotional and physical toll of her search, had all but given up hope of ever finding closure. She spent her days sifting through the pieces of Olivia's life, trying to make sense of it all, but each discovery only deepened the mystery. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. It wasn't a breakthrough from the police or the private investigators. No, it was a chance discovery, something Rachel stumbled upon while she was going through Olivia's old work documents. She had been organizing Olivia's files, looking for any final emails or messages that could shed light on what had happened, when she came across something unusual, a piece of paper buried at the bottom of a drawer. It was a document detailing a recent financial transaction, one Olivia had made herself, but what caught Rachel's eye was the name at the top, Nick Ellis. Nick. The same name Rachel had uncovered weeks earlier in Olivia's phone. But this was different. This wasn't just another mysterious contact. It was a transaction between Olivia and a man she had been working with on a marketing campaign. The details were vague, but what stood out was the amount, a hefty sum, much larger than any typical freelance job. The transaction was marked as a payment for services rendered, but there was no further explanation. Rachel's pulse quickened as she scanned the rest of the paper. The company listed as the payee was linked to a high-end investment firm based in Manhattan, an entirely different world from the marketing firm Olivia had worked for. Rachel's instincts screamed that this was the missing link, the clue she'd been searching for. But it didn't make sense. Why hadn't Olivia mentioned Nick to her? Why had she kept this transaction hidden? Her hands trembled as she quickly pulled up the company's website. Her fingers hesitated as she typed in the name, Nick Ellis, and when the search results popped up, Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The image that appeared was not what she had expected. Nick Ellis wasn't some small-time entrepreneur, he was a rising star in the criminal underworld. He was a name whispered among those who dealt in shady business practices, money laundering, and connections to some of the most powerful people in the city. This was no innocent marketing contact. Nick Ellis was part of the very network Daniel had been involved in. The realization hit Rachel like a cold wave. Olivia hadn't just stumbled upon Daniel's dark past, she had unknowingly walked straight into the heart of a criminal operation. Nick wasn't just an acquaintance, he was a key player, someone Olivia had gotten too close to. And it wasn't just about the money. Olivia had uncovered something far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Rachel felt a wave of nausea as the full weight of the discovery sank in. Olivia hadn't been killed because she was dating Daniel. No, her murder was the result of her digging into something far more dangerous, something that had spiraled out of control before she had even realized what was happening. The initial assumption that Daniel was the sole culprit, the jealous lover protecting his secret, was wrong. Olivia's death wasn't a crime of passion, it was an execution, a deliberate move to silence someone who knew too much. Rachel immediately called Officer Reynolds, her voice shaking as she explained the new information. The detective, initially skeptical, quickly connected the dots between Nick Ellis and Daniel's involvement in the money laundering scheme. Suddenly, the investigation shifted. Daniel, though still a suspect, was no longer the central figure. The operation had been far bigger than anyone could have imagined. It was a twist that no one had seen coming. The person everyone had thought to be the mastermind, Daniel, was just a pawn in a much larger game. Olivia had been targeted not because of her relationship with him, but because she had unknowingly threatened the very heart of a powerful criminal syndicate. Rachel's stomach twisted with a mix of anger and disbelief. She had known Olivia for years, and in all that time, she never imagined that her friend could have been caught in such a web. But now, the truth was undeniable. Olivia's quest for justice had led her straight into the fire, and ultimately cost her life. As Rachel stood in the midst of the whirlwind of revelations, the weight of what she had just uncovered hit her like a thunderclap. She had thought the worst was behind them, but the truth had only just begun to unfold. And the hardest part? The worst was yet to come. The revelation that Olivia's death was tied to a larger criminal network left everyone reeling. The truth that had taken so long to surface changed the course of the investigation, but it did little to ease the pain for those who loved her. For Rachel, the grief was unbearable. The discovery that Olivia had stumbled into something far darker than anyone had realized added a new layer to the trauma. Her best friend wasn't just a victim of a failed relationship, she was a casualty of a far-reaching conspiracy, silenced because of the secrets she had uncovered. In the weeks that followed, the search for Nick Ellis and the rest of the criminal network intensified. Daniel's involvement was confirmed, but even as the authorities closed in on him, the true masterminds behind the operation remained elusive. They had learned that Olivia had been close to uncovering the full extent of the illegal activities, and in doing so, she had become a target. Rachel knew that the fight for justice wasn't over, not by a long shot. As Rachel continued to work with the police, she found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions. Anger consumed her when she thought of how Olivia had been manipulated, how her trust in people like Daniel had been used against her. But there was also a sense of admiration for her friend's courage. Olivia had, in her own quiet way, been determined to make a difference, to expose the truth, even when it meant putting herself at risk. Olivia's death had not been in vain, but the emotional toll it took on those who knew her was far from over. Rachel continued to visit Olivia's apartment, sometimes sitting on the couch where they had shared countless conversations, hoping to find some solace in the space they had once shared. But it was no longer the same. Olivia's laughter, her light, were gone, and the emptiness left in their place was a constant reminder of the price Olivia had paid for her pursuit of justice. For Officer Reynolds, the case had also become personal. The investigation had turned into something more than just a job, it was a quest for redemption. The sense of failure that accompanied the long weeks of searching without answers had weighed heavily on her, but the new revelations gave her hope. However, even with the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something missing. The criminals behind Olivia's death were still out there, hiding in the shadows, and the case remained open. It wasn't just about bringing Daniel to justice anymore. It was about dismantling a network that had destroyed so many lives. As the investigation continued, Rachel found herself grappling with a new sense of responsibility. She couldn't bring Olivia back, but she could ensure that her friend's story wasn't forgotten. She began working with the police to gather more information, pressing them to find those responsible for Olivia's death, and to prevent others from suffering the same fate. It wasn't just about justice for Olivia, it was about ensuring that the darkness she had uncovered would not consume anyone else. In the end, Olivia's legacy wasn't defined by her tragic end, but by the courage she had shown in the face of danger. She had uncovered the truth, even when it meant losing everything, and that determination was something Rachel would carry with her for the rest of her life. The questions that remained, the full extent of the criminal network, and how deeply it had infiltrated people's lives, still haunted those who had loved Olivia. But one thing was certain, her memory would not be erased. And so, as the investigation continued, so did Rachel's fight. She would not rest until the people responsible for Olivia's murder were brought to justice, and until the truth was finally laid bare. It was a journey Olivia had begun, and Rachel was determined to see it through. Thank you for tuning in to this shocking true crime story. Olivia's quest for truth led her down a dark and dangerous path, but her courage in exposing the criminal network is something that will never be forgotten. If you found this story as chilling as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime updates. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Have you ever uncovered a hidden truth like Olivia? What do you think will happen next in this case? Stay tuned, because in our next episode, we'll dive into another unsolved mystery, with twists and turns that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss it.